this is Jennifer Pyank with A Crocheted Simplicity, and in this video tutorial I'm going to teach you how to crochet my on the bias rectangular Afghan. For the sample I used Lion brand Woolies Cakes, it's a DK weight yarn, and I used a 6mm hook. For video purposes I'm going to use Lion brand Woolies, which is a worsted weight yarn, and I'm going to use a 6.5mm hook. You can use whatever yarn and hook size you'd like. There are notes in the pattern on how to adjust the hook for the size Afghan or the yarn you're using. But I wanted to use a solid colored yarn. It's easier for me to show you on camera. You'll also need scissors, a yarn needle, and measuring tape or something to check gauge if you're using the DK weight yarn. Go ahead and gather your materials and I'll meet you back for the beginning section of your Afghan. Before I begin any project, the first thing I do is I pull several yards of yarn from the ball or the skein I'm working with. I leave it laying loosely beside me. This really helps to control my tension when I'm working any project. Now we're going to work the beginning row section of your Afghan. Begin with a slip knot on your hook. And for row 1, we chain 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to work into the back hump of the chain, into that first chain, and work 3 double crochets. 1, 2, and 3. We're going to chain 1 and work 1 more double crochet into that same chain. And this is it for row 1. Now the chains at the beginning of the row, they count for 1 double crochet and 1 chain 1 space. And this is going to be the same for each of the granny stitch rows. For row 2, we're going to chain 4 and turn. We're going to work 3 double crochets into the first chain 1 space. We're going to chain 1, skip the next 3 double crochet, work 3 double crochet into the next chain 1 space. Chain 1, and we'll work 1 more double crochet into that last chain 1 space. And this is the end of row 2. For row 3, we're going to chain 4, work 3 double crochets into the first chain 1 space. Chain 1, skip the next 3 double crochet, work 3 double crochets into the next chain 1 space. Chain 1, skip the next 3 double crochet, work 3 double crochet into the last chain 1 space. Chain 1 and work 1 more double crochet into that last chain 1 space. And this is the end of row 3. For row 4, we're going to chain 4, turn, work 3 double crochet into the first chain 1 space. Chain 1, skip the next 3 stitches, work 3 double crochet into the next chain 1 space. Chain 1, skip the next 3 double crochet, work 3 double crochet into the next chain 1 space. Chain 1, skip the next 3 double crochet, work 3 double crochet, a chain 1, and double crochet into that last chain 1 space. So there's 3 double crochet, chain 1, one last double crochet into that last chain 1 space. And here's row 4. For beginning row 5, we chain 4, turn. Again, we work 3 double crochets into the first chain 1 space. Chain 1, skip the next 3 double crochet, work 3 double crochet in the next chain 1 space. Chain 1, skip the next 3 double crochet, 3 double crochet in the next chain 1 space, and we repeat this across the last chain 1 space. Then in the last chain 1 space, we work 3 double crochet, chain 1, and 1 more double crochet into that last chain 1 space. And this completes beginning row section, rows 1 through 5. The next section is our increase row section. We're going to chain 1 and turn for row 1. And then in row 1, all we're doing is working a single crochet into each stitch and chain 1 space across. So work a single crochet into the first double crochet, and I work in the space. You can work into the chain if you'd like, but I work into the space. So work 1 single crochet into each stitch and chain 1 space across. Then when we get to the end of the row, remember we had a chain 4 and that counted for 2 stitches. It counted for a double crochet and a chain 1 space. So you need to work a single crochet into the chain 1 space and 1 into the top of the 3rd chain. The last one I do work right into the chain. And that completes row 1 of the increase rows. Now for row 2, we do not chain when we turn. There's no turning chain. Just turn our work, and we work a slip stitch into each stitch across. Now when you work your slip stitches, make sure you keep your stitches loose. Make sure that the loops of your slip stitches are the same size as the loops of your single crochet that you're working into. So the loops of your slip stitches should be the same size as the top loops of your single crochet from the previous row. If they're too small, you'll have to pull it out and work a little bit more loosely, or some people need to go up a hook size when working slip stitch crochet. Just insert your hook, grab the yarn with your hook, pull it through, and pull it right through the loop on your hook. Try to do that in one sweeping motion. Helps to keep your stitches more uniform. And that completes row 2 of the increase rows. Now this side is the right side of the front of your Afghan. The Afghan is going to be reversible, but this is what I intended to be the right side. Now for increase row 3, we chain 1 and turn, and you're going to work into the top of the stitches from increase row 1. So we're going to work into the top of the stitches from the single crochet, not the slip stitches we just made. The slip stitches are more on the front of our Afghan. We're going to work into the tops of those stitches from increase row 1. So we're going to work a single crochet into the first stitch, chain 1, and a single crochet into the next stitch. We're going to chain 1, skip the next stitch, single crochet into the next stitch. Chain 1, skip the next stitch, single crochet into the next stitch. Chain 1, skip the next stitch, single crochet in the next stitch. And we're going to repeat this all the way across till we have 2 stitches remaining. So we're going to single crochet into the next stitch, chain 1, and single crochet into the last stitch. So you should not have any skip stitches between the last 2 stitches. You'll have a chain 1 which forms one of your increases, just like the chain 1 here at the beginning of the row. Now for increase rows 4 through 10, they're the same. You're going to chain 1 and turn, work a single crochet into the first stitch, chain 1, single crochet into the next chain 1 space, chain 1, skip the next stitch, single crochet into the next chain 1 space, chain 1, skip the next stitch, single crochet into the next chain 1 space, chain 1, skip the next stitch, single crochet into the next chain 1 space. We're going to repeat this across. Repeat it across till you get to the last 2 stitches. We're going to work in the last 2 stitches are a chain 1 space and a single crochet. Okay, so we're going to work a single crochet into that chain 1 space, chain 1, and a single crochet in the last stitch. Now for rows 5 through 10, you repeat row 4. Go ahead and complete those, and I'll meet you back and we can work row 11. Here I've completed up through increase row 10. I just wanted to make a special note here. When you work these linen stitch sections, make sure that you keep your chain 1s loose enough. Otherwise you'll cause your work to cinch in. So if your work is cinching in on the sides, your chain 1s need to be looser. Just like our slip stitches, the chain 1s need to be the same size as the loops on your single crochet stitches. All your stitches should be the same size, whether it's a chain or a single crochet. Now, if it flares out a little bit at the top, that's okay. If it's huge, then you need to tighten up. But if there's just a little bit of a flare, it's okay. It'll end up coming back in once we work the next couple rows, as long as it's not too drastic. Now we can begin row 11 of the increase row section. We chain 1 and turn, and work a single crochet into each stitch and chain 1 space across. Again, you can work right into those chains if you'd like. I just work into the chain 1 space for these rows. Okay, after you complete row 11, turn your work, but do not chain. There should be no turning chain. Make sure you have plenty of yarn pulled from your skein laying next to you. because especially with slip stitches, you want to make sure that you're not pulling directly from the ball or skein of yarn. That can really affect the size and the tension of your slip stitches. So for row 12, work 1 slip stitch into each stitch across. Again, make sure to keep your slip stitches loose. Go up a hook size for these slip stitch rows if you need to, if it makes it easier on you. Okay, that completes through row 12 of the increase row section. Now for row 13, we're going to begin another section of the granny stitch. We're going to chain 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, turn our work. We're going to skip over the first stitch. So the first stitch where your chain 4 is, we're going to skip that stitch, work 3 double crochets into the next stitch. And again, just like before, we're going to work into the top of the single crochet, not into the slip stitch. So you're working into the top of the stitches from row 11. Chain 1, skip each of the next 3 stitches, and work 3 double crochet into the next stitch. Chain 1, skip each of the next 3 stitches, and work 3 double crochet into the next stitch. We're going to repeat this across till you get to the last 2 stitches of the row. So you've got 3 double crochet, chain 1, skip 3 stitches. Now we've come to the last 2 stitches. Work 3 double crochet into that next stitch. Chain 1 and 1 double crochet into the last stitch. And that completes row 13 of the increased rows. Now for rows 14 through 16, worked exactly the same. We begin by chaining 4. You can work 3 double crochets into the first chain 1 space. Chain 1, skip the next 3 stitches, 3 double crochets into the next chain 1 space. Chain 1, skip the next 3 stitches. We're going to repeat this across till you get to the last 2 stitches. The last 2 stitches being our chain 4 from the previous row. because we have a double crochet and a chain 1 space right in that chain 4. Okay, now that we're at the end of row 13, the last 2 stitches are here, our chain 4, which is 1 double crochet and a chain 1 space. So work 3 double crochets into that last chain 1 space, chain 1, and work 1 more double crochet into that last chain 1 space. And that's all there is to increase row 14. So go ahead and complete increase rows 15 and 16, and I'll meet you back. Here I've completed rows 1 through 16 of the increase row section. Those are from here to here. You're going to go ahead and repeat increase rows 1 through 16 until your blanket is the width that you'd like it. Position your blanket so the right side's facing up with the tail of yarn that you began with on your right side. Measure along this side here. Right now my blanket's only about 10 inches wide. Just making a swatch to show on video, but you're going to go ahead and repeat until you've got the width that you desire. Make sure you finish row 16 of the increase row section before you move on to the rectangular row section. That's really important to make sure your stitch count lines up. Each section of increase rows, you should increase 32 stitches. So go ahead and make your blanket as wide as you'd like it, and meet me back here. We're going to begin the rectangular rows. Now, in the rectangular row section, all we're doing is growing the length of your blanket. So our stitch count will not increase in any of these rows as we go up. So rectangular row 1, chain 1 and turn, and work a single crochet into each stitch and chain 1 space across. We've done this lots of other times. Now when you reach the end of the row, remember we have 2 stitches here at the end of the row for that chain 4. We work 1 in the chain 1 space, and the last single crochet we work in the top of the chain 3. Now for rectangular row 2, make sure you have enough yarn pulled from your ball or skein so it's laying loosely, because we're going to work another row of slip stitches. I'm going to work a slip stitch in each stitch across. And that's all there is to working rectangular row numbers 1 and 2. Now for rectangular row number 3, we're going to be working into the stitches of rectangular row number 1. Again, just working into the tops of the single crochet as we've done before. Chain 1, turn. We're going to skip the first stitch and work a single crochet into the next stitch. And chain 1, skip the next stitch, single crochet in the next stitch. Chain 1, skip the next stitch, single crochet into the next stitch. And we're going to repeat that stitch pattern all the way across till we get to 2 stitches remaining. Now we're down to the last 2 stitches because we have to skip this one with our chain 1. So we single crochet into the next stitch, chain 1, and single crochet into the last stitch. Now for row 4, chain 1 and turn. Single crochet into the first stitch, chain 1, single crochet into the next chain 1 space, chain 1, skip the next stitch, single crochet into the next chain 1 space, chain 1, skip the next stitch, single crochet into the next chain 1 space, chain 1, skip the next stitch, single crochet in the next chain 1 space, chain 1, skip the next stitch. Work like that, repeat that all the way across the last 2 stitches. Now our last 2 stitches of the row are a chain 1 space and a single crochet. So we're going to work a single crochet 2 together in that chain 1 space and the last single crochet. So to work a single crochet 2 together or a decrease, insert your hook into the chain 1 space, yarn over, pull up a loop, insert your hook into the next stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, and pull through all 3 loops on your hook. Now, the way we keep this blanket rectangular and we're not increasing is because we're working a single crochet 2 together here. So we're working a decrease on this end and we're working an increase on this end. And we're going to continue like that all the way up our blanket to grow the length of our blanket. So for rectangular row number 5, we begin our row with a decrease. So work a single crochet 2 together in the first stitch and first chain 1 space. Oops. Chain 1, skip the next stitch, single crochet into the next chain 1 space, chain 1, skip the next stitch, single crochet in the next chain 1 space, chain 1, skip the next stitch, single crochet in the next chain 1 space. We're going to repeat that all the way across till you get to the last 2 stitches. Okay, now we're at the last 2 stitches and we need to work our increase. So we're going to work a single crochet in that chain 1 space, chain 1, and work a single crochet into the last stitch. And that's row 5. For increased rows, or rectangular rows 6 through 10, you're going to repeat rectangular rows 4 and 5, and ending with a row 4. So go ahead and work rows 6 through 10, and I'll meet you back to work row 11. Here I've completed up through rectangular row 10. You'll notice that the one side of our blanket, after we reach the width we need, now our blanket begins to grow rectangularly. So you have one side where you're decreasing and one side where you're still increasing so that it grows taller. Now for rectangular row 11, we chain 1 and turn, and we're going to work a single crochet 2 together in the first stitch and chain 1 space. Then we work a single crochet in each stitch and chain 1 space across to the last stitch. So So this is a little different than previous single crochet rows because we still have to work a decrease and increase at each end. Okay, we get to the last stitch. We need to work 2 single crochets in the last stitch. Okay, for row 12, that's a slip stitch row, so we're not going to chain, no turning chain. Make sure you've got your yarn pulled from your ball or skein laying loosely, and work a slip stitch in each stitch across. All right, so now we're at the end of row 12. We're going to begin another granny section in the rectangular rows, so we're going to chain 4. Then turn. We're going to work into the tops of the stitches from row 11. We're going to skip the first 4 stitches, including the one where that chain 4 is worked. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4. Skip the first 4. Work 3 double crochets into the next stitch. Chain 1, skip the next 3, work 3 double crochets into the next stitch. Chain 1, skip the next 3, 3 double crochets into the next stitch. Chain 1, skip the next 3. We're going to repeat that all the way across to the last 3 stitches. So now we've got the last 3 stitches because we've skipped this as part of our repeat, so then we have 3 stitches remaining. We're going to work 3 double crochets into the next stitch, chain 1, skip the next stitch, and 1 double crochet into that last stitch. And that completes the rectangular row 13. Now I've got to add a new ball of yarn because I didn't start with a complete ball. That's my fault. So I'm going to go ahead and join it here at the end of the row. Okay, so to begin row 14, we chain 4, turn, work 3 double crochets into the first chain 1 space, chain 1, skip the next 3 stitches, work 3 double crochets into the next chain 1 space. Chain 1, skip the next 3 stitches, 3 double crochets into the next chain 1 space. Chain 1, skip the next 3 stitches, 3 double crochet in the next chain 1 space. We repeat this across to the last 3 double crochet and chain 1 space. Okay, so now we get to the last 3 double crochet and chain 1 space. We're going to chain 1 and work 1 double crochet into that chain 1 space. So again, we're still decreasing on this side and yet increasing on the other end. That completes rectangular row 14, I'm sorry. And now for rectangular row 15, chain 4, turn your work. We're going to skip the first chain 1 space and skip the first 3 double crochet, work 3 double crochet into that next chain 1 space. And this keeps us with the decreasing on that side of the row, that side of our Afghan. Then chain 1, skip the next 3 stitches, 3 double crochet into the next stitch. Chain 1, skip the next 3 stitches, 3 double crochet into the next stitch. We're going to repeat this across until we get to the last chain 1 space. Okay, we get to the last chain 1 space. We're going to work 3 double crochets, chain 1, and 1 last double crochet, all in that last chain 1 space. Then for rectangular row 16, we repeat rectangular row 14. And chain 4, turn, work 3 double crochet in that first chain 1 space, chain 1, skip the next 3 stitches, work 3 double crochet in that next chain 1 space, chain 1, skip the next 3 stitches, work 3 double crochet in the next chain 1 space. Repeat that across to the last chain 1 space. Okay, then we chain 1, skip the next 3 stitches, and work 1 double crochet in that last chain 1 space. And that completes 1 full section of the rectangular rows. The rectangular rows go from this corner and then up. It's what grows the length of your blanket. So we've gone from here, so we have on this edge, we have a shorter edge, and then a long edge. So now you repeat rectangular rows 1 through 16 until Now you repeat rectangular rows 1 through 16 until your Afghan is as long as you'd like it. So to measure the length, with the right side facing up and the tail of yarn to your right, measure the side that is on your right hand side. That will be the length of your blanket. So continue working until this side here is the length that you'd like. Then continue on to transition rows. Now I'm going to stop here for camera just so I can show you the next couple sections. We're going to work 2 transition rows. Transition row number 1, just chain 1 and turn, and work a single crochet in each stitch and chain 1 space across. Again, remember when we get to the end of this row, there's a chain 4 from the previous row. So we need to make sure we work the right amount of stitches in that row, or that space. Okay, when we get to that last chain 4, we have a chain 1 space we work into, and we work our last single crochet into the top of the chain 3. And for transition row 2, turn our work, no beginning chain, no turning chain. Make sure we have enough yarn laid aside to do slip stitches, and work a slip stitch in each stitch across. Okay, now that our transition rows are complete, we're going to work our decrease rows. For row 1 of our decrease rows, we're going to work into the transition row 1. So work into the top of the single crochets, not the slip stitches. I'm going to chain 1 and turn. I'm going to work a single crochet 2 together, or single crochet decrease in the first 2 stitches. We're going to chain 1, skip the next stitch, single crochet into the next stitch. chain 1, skip the next stitch, single crochet in the next stitch, chain 1, skip the next stitch, single crochet in the next stitch, chain 1, skip the next stitch. We're going to repeat that across to the last 2 stitches. Now when we worked our increase rows, we had an increase on both ends of the rows. When we work our rectangular rows, we had a decrease on one end and an increase on the other. And now we work our decrease rows, so that means we're going to be decreasing on both ends of the rows. And just like in our increase rows, each section that we worked, we gained 32 stitches. Each section of decrease rows that we work, we will decrease by 32 stitches. Okay, now we've gotten to the last 2 stitches. Work a single crochet 2 together in the last 2 stitches. We're going to chain 1 and turn. In decrease rows 2 through 8 are all the same. We begin by working a single crochet 2 together in the first stitch and chain 1 space. Chain 1, skip the next stitch, single crochet in the next chain 1 space, chain 1, skip the next stitch. Repeat that across till you get to the last 2 stitches. The last 2 stitches are a chain 1 space and single crochet. Now that we're at the last 2 stitches, single crochet 2 together in the chain 1 space and stitch. And that completes a row 2. For rows 3 through 8, go ahead and repeat row 2, and I'll meet you back for row 9. I've completed decrease rows 1 through 8. You can see how the Afghan, or my swatch, is beginning to decrease, head back towards a corner. So for decrease row 9, chain 1 and turn. I'm going to single crochet together in the first stitch and first chain 1 space, and then single crochet in each stitch and chain across to the last 2 stitches. Then when we get to the last 2 stitches, we have a single crochet decrease, or 2 together, in the last chain 1 space and last stitch. Okay, and for row 10, we're going to turn but do not chain 1 and work a slip stitch in each stitch across. Okay, now for decrease row 11, I'm going to chain 4 and turn. We're going to skip each of the first 4 stitches, including that first stitch where our chain 4 is. So we skip 1, 2, 3, 4, and work 3 double crochet into that next stitch. Chain 1, skip each of the next 3 stitches, 3 double crochet into the next stitch. Chain 1, skip 3 of the next stitches, 3 double crochet in the next stitch. Chain 1, skip the next 3 stitches. I'm going to repeat that across to the last stitch. Then we're going to work a double crochet in the last stitch. Now when you get to the end of that row, remember the skip 3 is part of the repeat. So that's why it looks like there's 4 stitches left. We've actually chained 1 and skipped 3. We're left with 1 stitch. Okay, then rows 12 through 14 are the same. And notice we have a decrease at the end of each row for the granny stitch section. Decrease row 12 through 14, we chain 4 and turn. Skip the first chain 1 space and the first 3 double crochet. Work 3 double crochet in the next chain 1 space. Chain 1, skip the next 3 stitches, 3 double crochet in the next chain 1 space. Chain 1, skip the next 3 stitches, 3 double crochet in the next chain 1 space. Repeat this across to the last stitch. Repeat it across the last chain 1 space. and then work 1 double crochet in the last chain 1 space. And repeat that for rows 13 and 14, and I'll meet you back here and we'll go over 15 and 16. Okay, decrease rows 1 through 14 are completed. Now we just have to complete decrease rows 15 and 16. For decrease row 15, we chain 1 and turn, and work a single crochet in each stitch and chain 1 space across. When you get to the end of the row, remember you have 2 stitches here, so we have to work 1 in the chain 1 space and 1 in the top of the chain 3. And then for decrease row 16, we turn without chaining and work a slip stitch in each stitch across. And then that completes 1 repeat of the decrease row section. It begins from here to here. That's 1 decrease section. You will work 1 decrease section for every increase section you worked. Now since I only worked 1, I only need to work 1 full section, or almost a full section. So you'll repeat decrease rows 1 through 16 until you get to the repeat of a 14th row and you only have 23 stitches left. Now in my case, since I'm just making a small swatch, that 14th row is this last row of granny stitch here, and I only have 23 stitches. So before I continue on to my ending rows, I need to frog or remove the last 2 stitches I worked. Because for my swatch, I didn't need row 15 and 16. But you need to complete those rows until you end with a row 14 repeat that has 23 stitches. Basically, you'll have just a small corner to complete at that point. Then continue on to the ending row section. So for ending row section, row 1, chain 1 and turn. We're going to work a single crochet 2 together in the first stitch and chain 1 space. Then we're going to work a single crochet in each stitch across to the last 2 stitches. The last 2 stitches are a chain 1 space and then the top of the chain 3. Okay, in the single crochet 2 together here, we work in the chain 1 space and the top of the chain 3. Okay, for ending row 2, we turn, do not chain, and slip stitch in each stitch across. For ending rows number 3, I'm going to chain 1 and turn. Work into the top of the stitches from ending row number 1, so in the top of those single crochet. I'm going to work a single crochet decrease in the first 2 stitches. Chain 1, skip the next stitch, single crochet in the next stitch, chain 1, skip the next stitch, continue in that stitch pattern across to the last 2 stitches. And then work a single crochet 2 together in the last 2 stitches. And chain 1 and turn to work ending row number 4. Ending rows 4 through 10 are worked the same. Work a single crochet 2 together in the first stitch and chain 1 space. Chain 1, skip the next stitch, single crochet in the next chain 1 space. Chain 1, skip the next stitch. Continue in that stitch pattern across to the last 2 stitches, or rather the last chain 1 space and stitch. Then work a single crochet 2 together in the last chain 1 space and stitch. And go ahead and repeat for rows 5 through 10. Here's row 5. We have 6. Row 7. And row 8. Are you seeing the light at the end of the tunnel yet? And row 9. And row 10. Okay, and at the end of row 10 you should have 5 stitches remaining. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. For row 11, with chain 1 and turn, single crochet 2 together in the first 2 stitches, chain 1, skip the next stitch, single crochet 2 together in the last 2 stitches. You have 3 stitches remaining. And row 12, single crochet 2 together in the first and the last stitches, skipping over the chain 1 space. And that's it. That completes the ending row section and finishes up your rectangular Afghan. Let's see. Now the last thing to do is to add a border. Because of the texture and the different stitch patterns, I just went with a simple border. You can certainly add whatever you'd like. I'm going to go over the first row and then you can add more if you'd like. Now for corners, I'm adding 3 single crochet in each corner. You could do single crochet, chain 1 single crochet if you prefer that instead, but I'd like a nice square corner. Now we're going to work into the sides of the rows around the whole entire blanket. You'll notice that we don't have a foundation chain to work into or top of stitches. Every single edge is worked in the side of the rows, and we're going to do them all the same. You're going to work 1 single crochet in the side of each single crochet row. So each of the rows in the linen stitch section. Work 1 single crochet into that single crochet slip stitch ridge row, and I'll show you how to do that in a second. And then 3 single crochet into the side of each double crochet row, and that'll make sure that your stitch count remains even. Stitch count isn't crucial, so if you're off by a stitch or 2, it's okay. If as you're working your edge becomes wavy, either go down a hook size because your stitches are too big, or remove and add less stitches. And on the flip side, if it becomes cinched or too tight, you can add more stitches. Stitch count is not crucial. So do whatever is aesthetically pleasing to your eyes. So I'm going to begin with a chain 1 and work 1 single crochet into the side of each row. Now in your corner here and here, you're going to have more than 8. As long as you work 1 single crochet into each single crochet row and 3 into the double crochet rows, you'll be even. Now when I'm working mine, I like to work into the stitches when you can see into the stitches and it's not a chain. I'll work right into the middle of a single crochet. Doing so, working in the middle of the stitches, helps to minimize any gaps you might have on the edges. And when I get to where we have the row of single crochet and slip stitch, I insert my hook through the center of the slip stitch since it's on the surface, and then right down through the center of that single crochet since it's laying on top of it. And work 1 single crochet. Then we get to the double crochet rows and work 3 single crochet into the side of each double crochet row. When we we have 3 chains from the chains 4, I was working right around the chain. But when I get to an actual double crochet, I like to work into the middle of the stitch. And then here we are at another slip stitch single crochet row. So we go through the top of the slip stitch and into that single crochet. And then we're back at single crochet rows. And that's it. That's all there is to it. After you add an edging for row 1 or round 1, you can add as many repeats if you'd like. Simply just chain 1, work 1 single crochet in each stitch around except for in your corner stitches. Work 3 to make sure you increase and don't have a curved corner. And that's it. Then your blanket will be complete. You can fasten off, leave in your ends, give it a block if you'd like, if it's a gift. If you have any questions, reach out to me via the contact form on my blog, www.acrochetedsimplicity.com. You'll find the full written pattern there with lots of step-by-step photos. You can also purchase an ad-free, print-friendly version from Ravelry or Etsy. There are links in the blog post. In those ad-free patterns, there is also a stitch chart and also a stitch count chart, which I've added depending on how many increases and decreases you choose. And it's kind of just a guideline to help you keep track if you'd like. Just something extra bonus in the little paid PDF. I hope you've enjoyed this video tutorial, and you'll come back and see me again sometime soon. Have a great day.